Hi everyone, I'm Jane at Rockin' Worms. Hope you're having a good evening. What I want to show you tonight in this video is what I discovered a few days ago, actually last night, when I did a check-in on my worm bins on my wall, right? So I have 3 bins here that are cocoon bins as a result of resetting my breeder bins on March 5th. So label people, it's important. So these are the cocoon bins from the reset of the breeder bins on March 5th. I'll link that video in the description below if you want to, refresh or check that out. So let me show you the status of these bins. This is the first bin, and you can see that it's beautiful. Oop, let me grab my glasses. Okay. Can't see anything without my glasses. All right, so this is a cocoon bin. Look you can see that I have hatches going on. This is great. This is expected. This bin is just over 5 weeks old. Oh, look there's still a cocoon, see? So even at 5 weeks, not all the cocoons have hatched, but they're coming along. The main thing I want to show you or point out is that this bedding is beautiful, right? It's light, it's fluffy, there's moisture in it, but not too much. It's good. There's still quite a few cocoons in here. Great. Okay. So this bin is good, and I did aerate it last night just a little bit, just to, make sure everything's cool, right? All right. This bin's good to go. Everything's great. Let me put it back out of the way because this is not the focus of this video. All right, here's bin number 2. This bin also looks pretty good. And it's light and fluffy on top. Moisture looks good. Look at all the hatches going on. Still have a couple cocoons after 5 weeks. That's perfectly normal. Cocoons can actually take up to a year to hatch, depending on what the circumstances are. All right, so you can see. Is this a breeder? This might have been one of the, yeah, this is one of the breeders I put in my cocoon bins to keep the cocoons company and also keep the soil aerated because they obviously move around. So this bin looks great. All right, I'm 2 out of 3 bins. So here's the third bin. I took this off and it was a muddy mess. This is just so wet. Look at that. Just look at this. It's really quite concerning. And I was concerned. Now, when I opened up the bin, it did have a flat top because the movement of the worms result in what's called a pool table effect, where you get that nice flat surface like you can see in the other bins. Well, this one's a little roughed up now, but they get a nice flat surface. But this bin, even with the flat surface, was just obviously soaked. And I was like, holy cow, I have a problem. This bin is way too wet. I don't know why, because it's identical to the other 2 bins, but something happened in this bin. So what I immediately did is start turning this bin. Let me just swing this a little bit here. It's easier for me to work on. I immediately started turning this material over to aerate it and, quite frankly, check and make sure I didn't have a bunch of dead worms, because I was really concerned that was going to happen or be the situation. And thankfully, I did not. But I tell you, I think I was rushing toward that cliff at warp speed. That if I had not checked in this bin last night, in the next day or 2, it would have been an entirely different story. I would have probably had a lot of dead worms in here. But thankfully, I dodged that bullet. So you can see, though, that as wet as this material is, I have a lot of baby worms. Here's some in here. And still also a couple cocoons that haven't hatched yet. So while the worms and the cocoons in this bin seem to be fine, it is still just way too wet. And I'm dancing with the devil as far as this bin potentially going south. And I do not want that to happen. So what am I going to do to fix this? So last night I thought, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll mix some of this really wet bin material with all the baby worms in with one of its sister bins that is fine. So I actually took a handful of the really wet bedding, started mixing it in this corner actually, and it wasn't going very well. It wasn't mixing in well. And at the same time, I started thinking, what am I doing? I'm taking a perfectly fine bin and adding a problem to it. And that just didn't seem to me like a good idea. So I decided, stop, don't combine the bins. Leave the good bin alone. So I did. What I'm going to do is quickly put the top back on the good bin and get it out of the way, put it back on its home, on its shelf, so it can continue to grow out those baby worms and hatch its cocoons successfully. All right, so now I'm back to this super wet bin. And as I talk to you, I'll continue to aerate it. It's actually drying out already a little bit because I did leave it open. But you can see that there's still just a lot of moisture in here. All right, what am I going to do? I am not going to add it to a good bin. So I have read and watched YouTube videos because we share information with each other, right? What have other people done when their bins have been super, super wet? They've added in dry material. Usually it's coconut coir or peat moss. I don't have either of those materials on hand. I don't use them. But what I do use is dry sifted cow manure. So this is my bucket of dry sifted cow manure that I make myself from my cows, right? So you can see how dry that is. So what I did is I took a handful just as a demonstration. I sprinkled it on and I started working it in to the bin. And just like adding this wet material into the sister bin, it's okay, but it just wasn't giving me the warm and fuzzies that it was going to work as quickly as I wanted it to. And again, take this bin off the bad path it was on and put it back more into a better direction as soon as I could. So I said, okay, it's working, but not great. So what am I going to try next? And then it hit me, why not try something that has already proven to be successful? And that is putting this material onto a thick piece of cardboard. So the cardboard will start absorbing the excess moisture, the excess liquid, and also leaving the top of the bin open so evaporation can also help dry out this bin. Now, when I said I've already been using this successfully, I mean in drying out, prepping my grow out bins for casting siftings, which I also have a video on, and I'll link that in the description as well. That bin is drying out fantastic. In a couple days, I've been already able to sift out quite a bit of castings, and I continue to move that bin along. So let me swing this back around. So I simply, made a cardboard bottom, using the bottom of the bin as a template, and put the cardboard in. And again, it's a thick piece of cardboard. Okay. So now I'm going to just move this wet bedding over here into the new dry bin. Now, why am I moving the castings as opposed to just, here's a little baby worm. Look at that guy. Why am I moving the bedding as opposed to just sliding the cardboard in the existing bin, which, I certainly could do? Two reasons. One, moving this over helps aerate it. Okay, still aerating is a good tool to help dry out overly wet bedding. The other thing is there is a thin layer of moisture on the bottom of the bin. It's a little hard to see, but I can see there's just a fine sheen of moisture on the bottom of the bin. And I'm going to be leaving that behind when I put this overly wet bedding into this bin. There's no sense taking the problem with me. I want to leave as much water behind as I can. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to be careful of, aware of, is while I want to aerate this bedding, I don't want to play with it too much, because if you play with it too much, you start getting balls of bedding, and when it starts to dry down, they can turn into kind of like little rocks, right? And that's not helpful for your worms because it's too dry for them to get into. Also, there will be moisture in the center of those little rocks, and that can go anaerobic. So you just need to be a little careful and take your time on drying the bins down so you keep the formation of little bedding rocks to a minimum. Okay, I'm almost done here. I'm going to have to obviously clean this bin out. And what I do is I clean it out as best I can, because I'm still picking up. See all these little baby worms in here? See, everybody's good. See, they're all moving. You can see them move. They're alive. So, and I've got these little worms down here. They're going to be stuck to the plastic. They like the moisture. I'm the one that's freaking out that it's too much. So after I scrape out as best as I can, I'm going to let this original bin, I've got some on the table, dry down, it's only like 20 minutes. Sometimes it's less than that. I'll keep checking it. And then as this dries down, it becomes easier to remove. And how I remove it is with my handy dandy dollar paintbrush. Because once this dries, I can just sweep down the drier bedding, put it in the new bin, and be off to the races. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. And let me summarize what the points are. There's a couple takeaways that I hope you get from this, and I certainly got from this. One is check your bins. Check your bins on a more frequent basis that corresponds with your schedule, but also being in a timely manner that if something is going off the rails, you catch it quickly. Now, I went about 3 weeks since the last time I checked in this bin, and it was at least 2 weeks too long. I should have been checking the bins more frequently. I would have caught this issue sooner. So that's point number one. The other point is when you're checking your bins, you've got to check all your bins, because this bin was right here on this rack, okay? Right below the other two bins, surrounded by breeder bins and cocoon bins and everything else. And this was the only bin I had a problem with, because I did check all the bins. And this was the only bin that was really, really wet. Why was it really wet? Honestly, I don't know. It's identical to the other two, but something happened. Maybe there wasn't as much evaporation going on. Maybe there was just a little bit more moisture in the bedding to begin with. I don't know. But if I hadn't checked this bin specifically and just gone with all the other bins being okay, this bin could have been a big disaster. So check all your bins. The last thing specifically I want you to take away from this video is stuff happens, right? And bins go bad, or they're on the track to go bad. Have your panic attack like I did last night when I saw this bin, and then calm down and get to work, to fix the situation. Because no matter how bad the bin is, it can be fixed. Even if this bin was anaerobic and all the worms had died, okay, which people have shared, thankfully, on YouTube video that has happened to them. You can still come back from it. The cocoons that are in here, and you saw cocoons. Here's a cocoon right here. This one hasn't hatched yet, okay? Here's another one over here, okay? These cocoons will hatch. You will have worms back in this bin. I have not lost the bin if I fix it, all right? So if you have a problem, figure it out, what you can do to fix it, and move on. It's part of the adventure. It's part of the journey. It's part of why we do what we do. Because if it was routine and boring, who would want to do it, right? It's a little exciting, not perhaps in a good way, but it's a little exciting. All right, so that's it for tonight. That's what I wanted to show you. Please comment below if you've had similar situations in your bins, how you addressed it, and any suggestions you have for me to go forward to address this situation as well. But for right now, I'm going to go with the cardboard on the bottom to absorb moisture, and I'm going to keep it open so I have evaporation working in my favor as well. All right, so please, again, comment any situations you've had. Think about liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video and learned a few things from it. I do really appreciate that. And otherwise, I remain yours in the dirt, Jane.